Good afternoon. Dear listeners, welcome to Šiaulių bankas meeting with investors. I'm Emilia from Nasdaq Vilnius and I'll be moderating today's event. We will start with a presentation from the management, which will be followed by the Q&A session. Please be informed that this webinar is being recorded. As always, I encourage every one of you to ask questions during or after the presentation in the Q&A section. With that said, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters, CEO Vytautas Sinius and CFO Donatas Savickas. Dear guests, please, the floor is yours and good luck.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear investors, good day to everyone and welcome to Šiaulių bankas webinar. The new year 2022 has started with the first quarter results, and this time we decided to make it not only audio but as well video format. Hope you'll enjoy and find our presentation and discussion and answering to the questions insightful and useful. So let's get started. Let's move on to the key highlights of first quarter 2022. So the net profit of Šiaulių bankas group for the first quarter reached 11.5 million euros. That's 7% less than the year ago. However, I would say the good thing that operating profit grew quite substantially. I would say 16% from 14.1 to 16.4, and that part is positive. Also, we'll develop later a bit more about our private and corporate client lending, which is also was with a rather significant growth the first quarter. Also, historically, we were describing our renovation achievements. So finally, we've managed to sign and launch the new modernization program. I'll touch that as well later. And also, you can see on the screen the new KPIs of the bank, top 4 KPIs. So we're expecting this year to have return on equity not less than 12.1%. As you can see, for the first quarter, it's 11.5. The cost-to-income ratio less than 46.5, and currently we have 45. And also from the capital risk management indicators, the CAR ratio more than 17%, currently 20, and cost of risk should be below 0.4%. I would say it's a bit conservative. We adjusted our initial figures that we projected at the beginning of the year. However, we all know all the geopolitical risks and macro risks increased, and our projections a bit more conservative than initially projected. But let's hope that if any new surprises would appear and no major risks will face the bank and Lithuania as a country, hopefully the results could be better. Okay, let's move on then to macro information. Despite the difficult first quarter with the new challenges worldwide, Lithuanian economy performed rather strong with a growth of 4.1% during the first quarter. And I would say it's rather a strong achievement. However, we see a potential slowdown and in upcoming quarters. And according to the Lithuanian Central Bank, the new forecast, which took place already after Russian invasion to the Ukraine, that the GDP should be in the area of 2.7% in 22 in such so-called conventional scenario set by Central Bank of Lithuania. Inflation is probably topic number one, not only in Lithuania but worldwide, and Lithuania is reaching pretty high figures, and we have 16.5% in April, and it's increased. And it seems that it's reaches its peak, and in a longer run, it should go down during the year. However, the expectation is that the inflation will remain still in high figures, and as we can see, Eurostat forecast it's 6.7% in 2022, but most likely current development shows that inflation of this year would be in the range of 10%. Labor costs also accelerating, and the pace is one of the fastest in European Union, with a 15% year-on-year growth, while unemployment rate is in line with the EU average, which is at 7%. Yeah, and as I mentioned already, that GDP projections compared to the Eurostat figures, which are comparable to the Eurozone and European Union, is now projected slightly lower than in the slide of 3.4%. So it's, as I mentioned, it could be in the range of 2.7 if nothing more significant negative happens. So we can move now to Šiaulių bankas, and let's talk about loan portfolio dynamics. The year started, I would say, rather strongly in all sectors. So all key segments grew, both on a quarterly level as well as on a yearly. And so we have 5% growth if we compare with the fourth quarter, and 22% comparison with the first quarter of 2021. 309 million worth of new credit agreements were signed, and that's 24% increase on year-on-year. And also the market share of Šiaulių bankas slightly increased during the last year, up to 8.8%, and that's the figures of fourth quarter 21. As you can see on a breakdown of loan portfolio change, you see that the major drivers of the growth were corporate and mortgage lending, 47 and 42 million accordingly. Interest rate, I would say, still rather solid at the level of 4.2% on a portfolio level. I would treat this decrease mainly influenced by the intensive growth of mortgage loans, which have slightly smaller interest rate compared to the other products. Right, so let's move on to a more detailed split of business segments. So let's start with corporate financing. The growth 4% in the first quarter, and on a yearly basis we have, as you see, 12% growth. Then the amount of new loans signed is 16% higher than the first quarter. So again, the pipeline, as you can see in a lower charts, the new agreement signed in the range of, on average, about 170 as is in 22 first quarter. So quite a strong pipeline of new agreements signed. Also worth mentioning that we've made some additional evaluation of our credit portfolio after the events in Ukraine, after the invasion has started in this country. And we've seen that only 5% of the portfolio is war affected, and even going to the more granular risk, we see that only 1.5% of Šiaulių bankas credit portfolio we included as a watch list, and those clients potentially could have some repayment problems. But the figure, as I'm mentioning, is rather insignificant. So potentially, at least looking from today's perspective, we don't see major issues with the credit quality of Šiaulių bankas portfolio. And since the portfolio grew rather slowly in, or I would say was rather flat in the fourth quarter of the last year. Our market share slightly decreased to 12.7% since the market was growing faster in the fourth quarter. But I hope we will catch up during this year, and the first quarter we'll see what will bring from the market share perspective. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on then to the private lending side, and we have mortgage and consumer finance here. Again, strong growth in the first quarter. Started quite slowly, 2 months, but the March was all-time records in our mortgage lending, and the growth came back to rather significant figures in the first quarter. And well, 55 million of new contracts were. Sorry, 53 million of new contracts were signed in the first quarter, so 29% more than in the first quarter. With this growth, we've reached high market share. It come up to 4.6% in the fourth quarter of 21, and the increases of 1.3 percentage points. Again, rather stable situation with the new agreements interest rates, so fluctuating in a range of 2.3–2.2%. So the market is, I would say, rather stable in that perspective. Good. So let's move on then to consumer financing side, and the trend is, I would say, again positive this year, and the raising inflation encouraged also clients to start buying more stuff and not postpone the planned purchases, whether it's a home repairs or other improvements. And we have rather significant growth compared to the first quarter of 21. So it was 42%, and one is a strongest growth quarters in the last period with a 37.5 million euros. Slightly lower interest rate compared to the previous quarters, mainly due to the structure that some more larger loans dominate, and they are with a slightly smaller interest rate compared to the smaller loans. And also worth mentioning that we are successfully working with the life insurance products blended to the loans for private individuals. So both we keep the level of our penetration ratio for insurers attached to the mortgage loans in the range of 15%, and the penetration ratio for consumer borrowers is about 50%. So that's a good blend of several products and benefits that customers get immediately by taking mortgage or consumer lending. All right, so let's go a bit deeper to the modernization project financing. So probably you've seen in the recent period about our communication of a new modernization platform. And I would say that's one of the unique competitive advantages for Šiaulių bankas as a separate business line. And we have a pretty solid and constant pipeline of the projects that we need to finance. And we are now the only player in the markets who are continuous to develop this business line. And as you can see, other banks, both local and international, are investors into the platform, which is administered by Šiaulių bankas. And we're happy that we are recognized both locally and internationally as a strongly performing partner in this area. So you see 25 million has been granted this year from the previous programs, because the program started just recently. But as I mentioned, the pipeline is rather solid. The interest both from the residents and also from the government is significant. Therefore, we are sure that we will use this 275 million program rather smoothly and fast. It's mainly in 2 years' time, it should be distributed, and we will start considering if everything goes in line with our plans, we'll start to considering additional similar platform to be launched for the next phases of renovation financing. And the pipeline, I believe, should grow further with current expenses related to the heating. The renovation becomes more and more beneficial for private individuals and the state, of course. Right. What else to mention on that? Yeah, probably some additional stresses to make. It's the platform will cover 600 old apartment buildings, and those should be renovated and improving living conditions of 16,000 households. So all in all, if we would use all the funds that has been distributed, and including this platform, Šiaulių bankas would be the partner who would grant more than 1 billion funds to the renovation program. So that becomes the substantial part of financing special line or for clients just based on the renovation projects. Right, so let's move on then to other business segment like daily banking. Here we have moderate, I would say not that intensive growth compared to the other business lines. So 3% growth on a quarterly basis and 9% growth on the yearly basis. So I would say, taking into account all the challenges related to the income related to the commissions, it's still, I would say, rather good growth in the first quarter. We've seen some increase in cash interest during especially first days of the war in Ukraine. So there was more interest to cash out and for FX transactions. But in 1 week or so, it started to diminish. However, we've generated some extra income out of this period. We also started to disburse new service packages for the people who came from Ukraine, so for Ukrainian individuals, with special conditions. And we have more than 500 such packages already, service packages for banking services provided for them. Also, the quite smooth development of so-called plans used by the clients, service plans, it increased by 7% on a yearly basis and reached 176,000 of clients. And as well, credit card distribution, I would say also strong on a quarterly basis, 7%, and on a yearly 36%. So that would also we will benefit out of credit cards number increase. And also worth mentioning about securities brokerage, which is already reaching the level of 1 million euros a quarter. So it's I would say a significant part of our income, and taking into account this environment with a high inflation, more and more clients are willing to use more alternatives to saving in deposits and to invest into different investment products, and we can generate some additional fees from securities brokerage. Good. So it seems from my side that's it, and I will give the floor to Donatas to continue. Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear investors. So I will continue several few slides and starting from funding and liquidity. And during the first quarter of 2022, we observed a slight decrease of deposits, which are the main source of Šiaulių bankas funding. We have a 2% portfolio decrease, and when we analyze what possible reasons could cause that, we separate two main reasons according to our analysis. That first is rising inflation, and the second is outbreak of war in Ukraine. And first several days or week after the 24th of February, so we noticed small movement among depositors, but later on it calmed down. Some funds was returned back, but the changes, what summarize the first quarter results, affected the bank liquidity profile and balance between loan to deposit positively. So LCR ratio increased up to 200%, and loan to deposit ratio are close to the balance and reach 85% compared to 79% as the end of 2021. What else could be mentioned about the coming steps? As you may know, bank has a loan for TLTRO from European Central Bank, and our plans, when we borrowed this, was that we probably will repay by the mid of this year. These plans were based on the prevailing interest rates in the market, but as these interest rates are rising, so we reviewed our strategy or tactic regarding this loan, and right now we are planning not to repay at the early repayment date, but to keep it as a funds, and these funds will be used for buying eligible bonds which positive interest margin, and also it will be additional source of liquidity if situation deteriorates. Another fact worth to mention is the fact that Moody's, when they reviewed the initial actions and reactions from the market regarding war in Ukraine, so in the early March, they affirmed our long-term deposit rating as investment grade and remain its positive outlook. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide about capital and risk management. Several messages on this slide. The first one is that the capital position of Šiaulių bankas remains safe and is above this liquidity requirements from regulator and above our risk appetite. We had very intense discussions when we had to decide about the level of dividends for 2021. We were probably, before the war, we were more optimistic regarding the level, but then we decided to suggest for voting moderate dividends, keeping some reserve for the future and keeping reserve in case this situation will move to the unfavorable direction. But we'll see whether these funds will be available for the next year dividends, hopefully. If not, then this capital reserve, it's as a safe cushion for depositors and investors of Šiaulių bankas. And after start of war, the special review of loan portfolio concerning the possible impact of war was performed, and additional 0.7% from portfolio, which correspond to about 15 million euros, was added to either to watch list or non-performing loans for further close monitoring. And as a consequence of that, some provisions were created, because as you may know, IFRS 9 standards require to be proactive and to form provisions not after a loss event occurs, but estimating what possible scenario could be developed, and based on these scenarios, provisions are created in advance. These provisions were 2.7 million euros, and which translates into 0.5% of cost of risk. As we already have 1 month in the second quarter, and as we see this picture of possible scenarios for the future, for the remaining 3 quarters, so we think that the remaining quarters will be more moderate regarding the provisions, and we expect the whole year cost of risk will be lower than 0.5%, what was in the first quarter. And of course, it's subject to the situation, how it will develop in the future. Okay, so probably that's all from my side, what I wanted to mention. We can move to the next slide, which is the last in our presentation before Q&A session. And here we can mention several facts again. So the first one is the Šiaulių bankas is the most liquid stock again in the Nasdaq Baltic market. An average daily turnover exceeds 0.65 million euros in this year. So we beat the record after record each consecutive quarter. Other fact that was to be mentioned, so the share price development. You see that in the first quarter, so we have quite volatile situation, and these movements could be commented as following. So first, again, it's our estimation, so we don't know exactly, nobody knows what the sentiments of market is regarding each stock, and also in general what moves market trends. So in the beginning, we think that negative trend was probably due to the announced level of dividends. So probably market expected a little bit more, and then this level of dividends was accepted slightly with reservations. Then after 24th of February, all stocks reacted negatively due to the war, but after some time they regained the value, and Šiaulių bankas also get back, not fully 100% to previous level, but it get positive impact. And then the last movement down was caused by dividends what actually were paid. So the dividend yield is in the range of 5%, so that affect market value as well. So right now the few weeks are more or less stable, and we'll see how it will develop in the future. How market analysts see the forecast for Šiaulių bankas. So we still have 5 companies that review Šiaulių bankas stock. Some of them updated their forecast such as Swedbank and Inlight Research. So some of them remaining are still probably in the process of updating forecasts, but the all states that share price of Šiaulių bankas that is currently in the market, so it's below their expectations. So it's a potential to grow. That's all from my side, and probably now we can turn to the next page for Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Indeed, now we will proceed with the Q&A. But before that, I would like to remind all the attendees that you can submit your questions in the Q&A box of your screen. So let's proceed then. And the first question that we received would be as following. Banking and cybersecurity. What do you see? What are the biggest threats? Thank you.
Well, I can take this question, and not expanding too much to the subject, I would say currently this topic is one of the priorities in our IT team, in our IT agenda, and also in a risk management team. Also, last year we introduced some additional forces in that field with IT security officers, and it's a critical thing. What we do, it's a constant housekeeping of our systems and checking and testing them, how they are operating and how they are resilient towards external threats. The important thing is working with the significant service providers, so choosing only the top-notch partners that would have the critical services for the banks and other industries, for the governmental institutions. They are in the first line to be recovered in case of some attacks or some issues. So I would say we focused on the cooperation with the top-notch partners, using the best providers who can make us secure, and also investing in our team as well. So I would say that's one part of cybersecurity. If we look broader to that, so also intensive work with the fraud prevention. So that is related with the bank and with our clients. So whatever, it could be phishing or a business account change or other types of fraud. So we are hardly working and continuously checking how it develops and how we can prevent. And also observing and reacting to the both local governmental messages and exchanging information with them, and also looking around what's happening, like recently by Germany increased alertness of potential cyber attacks. So constantly ready and prepared for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Another question is asking, could you please provide some flavor on the effect of rising interest rates on SAB's margins? Thank you.
I'll take that. So starting from the answering from the end, so we expect the net interest margin will be stable with slight decreasing tendency. And I will explain why. So the competition is the main driver for decreasing margins. And also another factor is that the change of structure of portfolio. So with more mortgages presenting bigger part in our total portfolio, which you know is with lower yield. But talking about effect of rising interest rates, so of course it will have a positive effect to our asset side. And the question is, what about the funding? And before this over liquidity phase that we are living the last few years, the main source of funding was for Šiaulių bankas local deposits, term and demand deposits. But now we have more diversification and more available sources. I could mention TLTRO that I already commented earlier. So it's also very attractive source of funding. Also, when we increase our mortgage portfolio, we start thinking about possibility to issue mortgage-backed securities. Our level of mortgage portfolio let us already think realistically about such option. And this source of funding is attractive for investors and attractive for the borrower as Šiaulių bankas due to the low interest rate. And of course, being bigger and supervised by ECB, having good investment grade ratings, we are, how to say, more attractive to borrow funds from the market. That let us think that we will have more diversification on funding side, and that will let us keep stable net interest margin. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you for your answer. Could you please elaborate more on new modernization fund impact on the bank's income? Thank you.
Right, so this 275 million euros fund, it will be also important for Šiaulių bankas income generation. So just to remind that mainly we have two sources of income in the modernization projects. Part is the based on the commission income of working with those funds and disbursing them, and also collecting back disbursed amounts to the households. And the other income is related with interest income for the funds that we as Šiaulių bankas employ into those programs. So before the launch of the program, on the average in the last years, if I recall correctly, the income level from the modernization project was about 10 million euros income for both from interest and commission income. And the platform will generate on average, on a weighted average, since we're participating in all three layers of a fund, it will be about 3.2% weighted average interest rate. And also we will generate 1% commission based on the portfolio, outstanding portfolio. It will be on a yearly basis. And the other commission income would be 0.5% from the disbursed amount. So it will be one-off fee from the disbursed amounts. So that will be an additional income. And of course, we will continue to generate income from the previous programs that will start to diminish, but this platform and potentially the new platforms will continue to be the quite substantial part of our both interest income and commission income from renovation business.
Thank you. Could you please expand on why the stock is doing so poorly in the last 4 months, please?
Okay, I can probably continue with that question as well. Probably, yeah, we know what has happened in the world in the last several months, and situation has changed significantly. Therefore, I would say overall correction has happened in the markets, and I would not exclude Šiaulių bankas significantly from the other players or from indexes. So, for instance, if we take year to date, Šiaulių bankas share price decreased by 15%, and actually by the same percentage points, Euro Stoxx bank index decreased by 15%. So, fundamentals of Šiaulių bankas, I believe, are strong, and as you've heard in the previous slides and in our presentation, that so far we do not see any significant threats for the sustainability of income generation and the business model as such. Therefore, on a long run, I believe it should come back to the more normal levels than it is now after this obviously rather shock impact of the events in the war in Ukraine. And of course, a geopolitical risk is higher than it was before. However, I would say that Lithuania has never been prepared better and more secure with being part of the NATO. Never before. So I would say we currently feel safe being part of this alliance.
Thank you very much. Do you expect provisions to be increased due to the war in Ukraine?
Yeah, that's probably for me. I tried to explain during the main part of presentation, but probably this question was put into the question list before that, but I will try to summarize and repeat that. So during first quarter, we tried to estimate the possible scenarios for the future and vulnerable customers and sectors, and provide sufficient provisions for that. But it's not guarantees, and there are no guarantees that it will remain the same. So it's based on our current view for the future. What I said also, and could repeat, that our current estimation is that for the coming quarters, level of provisions will be lower than proportionally lower than in the first quarter, and we will end cost of risk ratio below 0.5%. That's it from today's perspective. Yes, that's all.
Thank you very much for your answer. Let's proceed. How do you expect loan demand to develop during 2022? Thank you.
Okay, I could share the views what we use when we updated our budget for 2022 and what assumptions we made regarding our main segments, what it's our priority segments. That about corporate financing, we think that geopolitical situation has prompted some companies to slow down their expansion plans, while on the other hand, there are growing demand for investment in projects that guarantee energy independence, and also it's also there are quite big demand for needs for working capital, and due to the increase of commodity prices. That makes us believe that corporate financing portfolio demand for such type of finance will be stable in the level what was projected even before the crisis. Talking about consumer finance, we estimate that rising inflation encouraging borrowing and negative impact to such demand is unlikely. Mortgages, what we see right now, that demand for housing remains strong, but again, we are most cautious about this segment, and this ambitious plan that we build for ourselves and for our salespeople, that how to say, it's under question mark. How big this question mark is again, it's subject to the further development of scenario on the geopolitical area. That's all probably regarding our forecasts.
Thank you very much for your answer. Could you please comment on when will be the next share buyback, please?
Right, we have this opportunity, and the last shareholders meeting has approved the option of 20 million euros for potentially for buybacks, and that will to last for more than 12 months. We have this window to use it or not. Just to remind that the dividends were paid recently by Šiaulių bankas, and currently we are monitoring situation because it's still fragile how overall geopolitical situation develops and the macro. We will see how our markets, how our growth in key business segments continues, and then we'll come back to discuss this topic in our management bodies, whether it's a time to, and of course the share price as well, probably one of the indicators we will observe how that will develop, and this topic would be discussed as one of the instruments to bring the value for shareholders additionally. So far no decisions made, but this option is available, and the preparedness exists both from technical point of view to legal and etc. So we'll discuss this question during the year.
Thank you very much. Could you please expand on what portion of loans are fixed rate? What is the duration of that portfolio, and what is the duration of mortgage portfolio, please?
Okay, so I will answer, but I don't have in front of myself the exact figures, but how to say, please excuse us, some approximation will be not precisely exact. Majority of our loans are at floating rate, except from consumer loans and some small loans that makes us estimation of up to 10% of from total loan portfolio is at fixed rate. And duration is, again, it corresponds to the average duration of consumer loans. I would say that 2-3 years average, even less, probably even less. About duration of mortgage portfolio is, again, we are following the market trends, and as the average new mortgage loan is close to 20 and more years. So, but as we have different mix, I would say is duration, average duration is 15 plus years. But again, with the disclaimer that more precise figures could be extracted after some short analysis.
Thank you very much for your answer. Except for the mortgage lending, the market share of SAB was declining in Q1. What are the main reasons, and what do you plan to do about it?
Good. Shall I?
No, I can do that. Probably just to make some clarification with the question that the figures from market shares is related with the fourth quarter results, not with the first quarter. So with the first quarter, we'll see probably the next phase of our presentations. So it's correct. Only the timing was different, but the market share in the mortgages continues to grow rapidly, while with other segments it's stagnated. And as I said, mainly in the corporate side is the reason that our portfolio was flat in the fourth quarter and the market was growing. So that was one part. But since the change was rather significant, about 0.9 percentage points decrease, we see that potentially there was some technical recalculation related with one bank's aggregation of the portfolio on a Baltic level, and probably some different assignments to the Lithuanian market extra credit portfolio. So that could be the reason of changes in the fourth quarter, but we will see how it will develop. And with the current growth, we feel quite comfortable that we are growing in the same pace or faster than the market. And the same situation with consumer financing, that last year was quite tough in the growth, having our already quite significant portfolio in this business. But the first quarter and the further months shows rather positive dynamics, and we hope that we'll be on a growth path in the market share as well.
Thank you very much. And do you have any plans to reactivate the search for strategic options for the bank? Thank you.
I would say, talking generally, we continuously working on both scenarios, so growing organically and also open for considerations of the potential M&As and acquisitions of assets. So this topic is always considered as an alternative. We just recently were aware about the transaction that has been done by BRD and some other investors. So this is not yet completed in full. So let's wait for the completion of that transaction, and we'll see whether it's needed to do some extra steps from the bank side, considering some strategical alternatives. But so far, I would say we are constantly growing organically and also looking for other opportunities, if any would arise in our horizon.
Thank you very much. Could you please put a color on a bond portfolio result? What trend do you see in the upcoming periods? How do you protect from growing interest yields? Thank you.
I'll take this. So our bond portfolio consists from the small trading portfolio, which are repriced according to market values each day, and the result of it is shown on the P&L each quarter. And this portfolio is principally is not affected by higher yields. Talking about portfolio held to maturity, so we made the decision several already years ago that we want to decrease the duration of this portfolio, and currently we had quite a short remaining period for that, and each month we have inflow of funds from that, and we higher interest rate in the bond market allows us to invest with the higher yields, and we see that the average yield on portfolio held to maturity will increase in the coming quarters. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. As all the questions are answered, on behalf of Šiaulių bankas and Nasdaq Vilnius, thank you everyone. It was our pleasure being with you today. The recording of the presentation will be available in the company's website and Nasdaq Baltic YouTube channel. Gentlemen, thank you for the very informative conference. Have a good day, everyone, and goodbye.